Okay, it looks like the number of participants is pretty balanced out, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on business succession planning partners. My name is Megan Peasley, and I am the Iowa SourceLink Program Coordinator at the University of Northern Iowa's John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center. Here, we work with the Iowa Economic Development Authority to bring the Iowa SourceLink platform to all business owners. Whether you're looking to start, grow, fund, or even exit your business, Iowa SourceLink is here to help you. We provide step-by-step guides, make helpful referrals to our nearly 400 partners, and house the Business License Information Center. We also have the pleasure of partnering with amazing organizations across the state to put on webinars like today's. Before we get started, though, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available within the next week. You'll receive a link to today's recording in the same email that you'll receive as proof for your attendance. The slides for today's webinar will be shared momentarily in the chat box. If and when other resources and contact information is brought up during the webinar, they will also be placed in the chat box. Please enter any questions that you may have into the Q&A box located in the bottom half of your screen. We are going to hold off on answering all the questions that come in until the very end. Today, we're thrilled to have two incredible centers joining forces to support businesses through one of the most crucial transitions they'll ever face. Succession planning isn't just about handing over the keys, it's about preserving values, leadership, and long-term viability. Let's meet our speakers. First, we are joined by Dan Beekman. Dan serves as the director of the University of Northern Iowa's Family Business Center. He has extensive experience working with early stage firms on capital formation and exit strategies. He has also served as a business consultant at the University of Minnesota and Iowa State University. Dan holds a bachelor's degree in finance and entrepreneurial management from Iowa State University and a master's of business administration from the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Business. Dan primarily focuses on succession planning and family business. Prior to his current role, he worked in asset management, venture capital, and investment banking industries, most recently in business development and product management. We're also joined today by Todd Hutchinson. Todd is the director of Advance Iowa, a part of the University of Northern Iowa's Business and Community Services organization. He leads a team dedicated to providing strategic guidance, education, and transition support to business owners, employees, and communities to help them grow and adapt with confidence. Overall, Advance Iowa provides a collaborative, values-driven team supporting Iowa's businesses, experience guides and strategies, education, and transition planning, commitment to empowering businesses, owners, teams, and communities, and connections to Iowa's economic development landscape through UNI's Business and Community Services Network. Todd holds an MBA from the University of Iowa and received his undergraduate degree from Western Illinois University, also earning a professional certificate in Industry 4.0 from MIT. Along with leading Advance Iowa, he has been teaching strategic management at UNI for the past 4 years, and he previously taught business strategy and leadership courses at Mount Mercy University. Prior to that, Todd spent 32 years in leadership roles for Rockwell Collins Aerospace across a wide variety of functional departments and roles focused on strategic management, continuous improvement, supply chain management, and systems implementation. Overall, we are super excited to have Dan and Todd joining us today. And with that, I will let them take over.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan. Appreciate both Dan and I think I can speak for him. Appreciate the wonderful introductions. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for investing an hour of your time to learn a little bit more about succession planning. Dan and I will approach succession planning from a couple of different angles and perspectives, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some information that's valuable and useful to you in your careers. Just real quickly, the first question that I would ask would be, why is succession planning important? Um, Nationally, we know that 79% of business owners plan to exit their businesses in the next 10 years. That's a pretty high percentage. And of those 79%, only 17% of them have a written plan for succession. So what that means is that many businesses are very unprepared when it comes to planning what's going to happen in the next phase of their management leadership operations. What is succession planning? It's kind of just exactly what it sounds like. It's the process of selecting and developing key talent to ensure continuity of critical roles, meaning every business needs to be able to continue to operate no matter what happens in their business life. So if there's some kind of a disruption to business, if there's some kind of disruption to the leadership of the business, some kind of a disruption to key personnel in the business, there should be a succession plan in place so that the business doesn't skip a beat and continues to operate successfully. We talk about critical roles, key talent, leadership talent, and ensuring that continuity. So preparing all of our successors to seamlessly take over critical roles, maintain operational effectiveness without interruption. Just exactly what it sounds like. We want to make sure that there is a succession plan in place so that succession happens and we continue to succeed as a business. Why does it matter? Lots of different reasons, and this is just a short list here. Preserves the legacy and values. Many of the businesses that we represent in Iowa are small to medium-sized enterprises, so they're fabric, they're part of the fabric of the communities that they're in. They have a legacy in the communities and they have values. So we're making sure that, or helping to make sure that that founding vision and family principles that are involved across generations is continued. Avoids a leadership vacuum. It can be very damaging to a company to have to operate for any period of time without key leadership roles being filled, and without that seamless transition happening. Helps to strengthen business continuity to keep their operations stable and keep customer relationships intact. Customers abhor a vacuum. They don't want to be in a business that doesn't have, or be partner with the business that doesn't have continuity with leadership. On the family business side, it reduces family conflict, clarifies roles and expectations. Everybody knows what everyone else is supposed to be doing, minimizing disputes over leadership ownership, particularly in times of transition. Preps the next generation, so equips successors with the skills that are needed. Protects financial health. There are heavy investments in business by the owners, by the families, by the communities, by the employees, by all stakeholders of their business. And then supports long-term growth. So succession planning does, or is part of strategic planning. So it allows you to align leadership roles and maintain continuity through strategic goals and future expansion of the business. Businesses go through life cycles. So, it may early in a business life cycle, it may not seem as important to worry about succession planning early in careers, early in lifetimes, early in life cycles. It may be something that's kind of on the back burner as you're getting a business started up. But at some point, there's a pivotal moment where if you don't have a succession plan in place, it can be very damaging to your business not to be able to continue to do the same things that we talked about in the last couple of slides with your business. So being able to maintain continuity and succession during that business life cycle is very important. We want to continue to innovate, continue to grow through that business life cycle. Here at University of Northern Iowa, in our Business and Community Services group, we have a number of groups that work with different types of businesses and organizations across the state and nationally. The two that are represented here today, the Family Business Center and Advance Iowa, really work probably the most directly with small to medium-sized businesses and have the most direct input and the most, or the greatest ability to help influence succession planning. Dan is going to take over here in a second and talk about family businesses and how succession planning works and needs to work in those. And then I'm going to take over a little bit later again from him and talk about business transition and business growth and non-family business, business-oriented companies. So that's how we're organized, and it's kind of a rare organization across the country. We have some unique capabilities to be able to help different types of businesses across the state. With that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and let him begin to talk about succession planning and family businesses.
All right, thanks, Todd. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad you can be here with us. I'm going to assume that most of you are small business owners that are with us, or work with small businesses, or maybe have a key role in developing business in your geography, your area. So why do I need to do succession planning? You're probably thinking I've got plenty to do already, just keeping the business going and growing, and maybe succession isn't something I'm going to be thinking about for 20 or 30 years. And so I think that's a great retort back as far as why waste time on this. I would counter that by saying that, well, as this slide indicates, you never know type of thing. And so, there's a couple of retorts to that. One is, if you're building a business with succession in mind, I think you're building a healthier and stronger business, because you're building it knowing that you're going to be selling it to somebody else, or that you're a steward of it to somebody else who's going to own it after you. And so, I think that just goes hand in hand with growing your business, with making good decisions. But the other answer to that is you never know. And the proverbial hit by the bus statement can certainly apply here, but I've broken this out into the 5D scenarios, I guess. And, obviously we don't have a predictability for that. Disability that might knock you out of the ability to be running the company. For our family owned companies, daughter-in-laws are a big D, but son-in-laws are too. It just so happens that son doesn't start with a D, so the daughter is easier to play with here. And what we're saying by that is, maybe you're growing your business and thinking your kids are going to take over someday. Just remember that your kids are one thing, and you've raised them. They've sat at your dinner table, but their spouses have not, and they have different motivations, different needs, different wants, different opinions on how you've done things. And so they're not marrying you, of course, they're marrying your kid. And so thinking about the fact that um, they are going to be maybe a part of the family at some point, and how do we adjust or plan for that? Disagreement, certainly another one. Maybe you have a partner in your business. A lot of businesses have partners, and unfortunately, a lot of partner-owned businesses um, end up failing because of disagreement between partners. Distress from the economy, maybe your particular industry, something like that. So I just want to mention that real quick. And if we could go to the next one, Todd, I'll talk a little bit more about our Family Business Center. So our center was started about 5-6 years ago. There were no other programs focused on family business in Iowa, and family businesses have a lot of unique needs and challenges. And so we saw that through our succession planning work that we were doing with business owners. Many of them were looking to transition to the next generation of their family. And they had unique needs, and, fair and equal don't mean the same thing. And so how are we splitting up the business? How are we dividing up roles and responsibilities? What once was run by the founder of the company is now going to be run by several siblings. How are they going to get along? How are they going to grow the business so that they can all participate and make a living, etc.? Anyway, we were seeing families from Iowa leave to go to other states to participate in family programming in Chicago, Minneapolis, Sioux Falls, etc. And so we thought we need something in Iowa. And that's exactly what we did. We started a program, a peer-to-peer based program. So our program is so focused solely on family-owned companies across the state, and they're there to share ups and downs, trials, tribulations with others so that each family can kind of learn from another on how they've done succession, how they've done next gen development, different topics like that. I don't know if I can switch these slides or not right now, but Todd, you want to give me a new one there? Okay. And so maybe you're thinking, why family business? Why are we spending time in that space? And basically it's just because it's a massive space and it's incredibly critical to the Iowa economy. A lot of rural areas take a lot of their identity from the larger family owned businesses that are located there. And I'm sure you can think of communities where a large business, family owned, has sold out to a private equity firm or a bigger corporate player or something like that. And, a lot of times eventually those operations can be closed, right? And leaving the town in kind of a tough spot. And so we just want to put focus on how can we help family firms stay family owned. And a big way to do that is by getting them together to talk about their uh, opportunities, their struggles, sharing best practices, etc. So I'll leave that at that and see what we got next here. Yeah, succession is a big deal. A lot of owners don't think about it until, the last couple of years of when they want to be done. They don't think about who their successor is going to be. They haven't thought about the financing of that person, et cetera. And I know Todd's going to talk a lot about that stuff as we go here, but I have a definitely a lot of personal passion for this, just with a family member of my own that ran a business for 30 plus years and then, was got sick and wasn't able to transition that business to anyone else and it closed. And so I think about that when I think about succession and just want to reiterate the importance of it. But in the family space, it's very difficult to transition your family from one generation to the next. So many different things come into play with family conflict and dynamics. And most of us don't deal with that on a regular basis. And so we often say stupid things, we upset our siblings, we piss off our mother in law, whatever it might be, and things can go south in a hurry. And so these stats just kind of bear out just how tough it is. So if you're lucky enough to know of a second, third, fourth, even fourth generation business in Iowa, just know that they are incredibly rare. So takes a lot of effort to get there. Um, yeah, and this is just kind of detailing why family businesses fail to make it to the next generation. You might assume it's because the business fails or the business model isn't profitable or whatever it might be. And actually, the business model has very little to do with it. It mostly has to do with family communication, with talking through your wishes, with talking through what you want to happen next. I work with a lot of family farms across Iowa. This is very, very common in that space as well, of who's getting what, et cetera. And when assumptions are made and they differ from the reality, big fights can happen, lawsuits can happen, and families are torn apart. And so our focus is really on helping people be proactive in their approach to communication and planning. And that really is what this whole presentation is about. So thanks, Todd. So as I said, we've been around since about 2018. Our membership has continued to grow. We're currently around, I don't know, we work with about 150, 160 families a year across the state. We have a conference coming up. I think I'll get to that in the next slide, but we are the only family business program in Iowa, focused on Iowans. So I think the next slide talks a little bit about our upcoming events, maybe. Our team. So we have a team of consultants, event planning, coordinators, marketing folks, et cetera, that work with families on a daily basis. Um, and what's next maybe for us here is, let's see. You got the next slide, Todd? Or maybe Megan, can you advancing? Okay. Oh, I guess I could talk real briefly about the three circle model too. When you think about a typical small business owner, and that might be many of you on this call, you own the business and you run the business, right? And so you're you're not really maybe potentially worried about that family circle, but as soon as you bring family into the picture for a family owned company, you can see where all of a sudden we've got lots of different, I call it lenses or views or roles that might be played by a particular person. So there could be a family member who works in the business and is also in ownership. That's probably that number one circle there. But then you've got family members who maybe own part of the business, but they don't work there. They've moved away, whatever it might be. You might have, you're also going to have a big bucket of folks, in bucket number seven there that work for the business. They're not part of ownership. They're not part of the family. And the whole point of this is just to showcase that there are different motivations amongst family members, depending on which bucket they're in. If you're an owner of the business, but you're not working there, for example, you might want different types of decisions to be made with cash flow and things like that. And um, are if you're working in the business, might want to see that cash flow stay in the business rather than be paid out as dividends. And I don't want to get too in the weeds on that right now, but just so you know that there are different motivations for everybody, which is what creates all the conflict and the Jerry Springer moments that we often see in family companies. So, um,
Dan,
next.
just so you know, the
Yeah.
upcoming events are later in the presentation.
Yep. Okay. Gotcha. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so some best practices. So what do we suggest for families? And this is just real high level. If any of you have further questions on this or want to get more involved in what we do with our Family Business Center, please check in with me after the fact, or you can ask questions now or whatever. But um, we suggest having written succession plans, having documentation, having conversations, having regular family meetings. You might think, what does that even mean? That means exactly what it says. Are we getting together as a family to talk about the business, to talk about our roles in the business, to talk about our pay, uh, our all these technical, often difficult conversations. You need to be having those, and if you're not, they're going to happen for you, and they're probably going to happen in the way of conflict and family strife. We often push our family businesses to consider having a board of directors, and I would say that applies to non-family companies too. How can we have an advisory board that maybe gets together on a, I don't know, semi-annual, quarterly basis to talk about the business, to give advice and insights to the owner. Um, I now know firsthand. I've got a couple of side businesses of my own, and knowing just how I would say lonely it can be at the top. How if you're running your company, you don't always have great people to talk to about decisions that you're making. An advisory board is a great way to do something about that. Anyway, that's probably what I would mention there. Maybe next slide. Yeah. So as you can see, we work with about 150 companies a year across the state. We had our conference last year we hosted with the Kraus family, which had until very recently owned the Come and Go gas station chain. Um, this year we're going to be I'll talk about it as we get further into the slides, guess. But this is sort of summarizes kind of what our last year was like. We do teach classes in family business, and anyway, uh, next slide. All right,
Okay.
Todd,
Great.
take over.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for all the great information on family businesses and succession planning. Again, we'll come back a little bit later and Dan will go through some of the upcoming events that are specifically focused around family businesses. At Advance Iowa, we handle some of the non-family owned businesses, but a lot of very similar topics to what Dan has already brought up. We have business solutions that reach into the succession planning transition area, as well as the growth and innovation area. We're going to talk about the upcoming Iowa CEO conference, and one of the things that is part of Advance Iowa is the Iowa Center for Employee Ownership, and we're going to hit that a little bit also, where we work with small and medium-sized enterprises on transition planning and employee ownership models. Advance Iowa, as I already have talked about, along with family business, was part of that. University of Northern Iowa Business and Community Services Group. In Advance Iowa, we focus really on two different pillars. They overlap a lot, but our advanced business growth sector, also known outside of the state as the Center for Business Growth and Innovation, we focus on things like strategic planning, continuous improvement, project management, helping businesses innovate and do whatever it is that they need to be successful. On the other side of that umbrella is our advanced business transition pillar. Business transition is what we're going to focus on here because it applies most directly to succession planning, and the Iowa Center for Employee Ownership is our major vehicle that does that. But at Advance Iowa, we're really focused on helping the whole business, including succession planning, being prepared for that. Our team, myself, Deb Giruso in Des Moines, Stacy Molinex, our senior project manager for employee ownership, Judy Butler, who's our program manager, does a lot of the event planning, event coordination, working with sponsors, all that kind of thing. Janelle is the one who keeps us honest with our program finances. She's our business manager, and then Annette Stevenson is working on all of our marketing and communication materials. So we try to provide a holistic service to businesses that we work with. Our purpose, I kind of mentioned it already, but it's really to help businesses be successful, be a catalyst for growth, transformation, and outreach for businesses, communities, and lives. We recognize that particularly in smaller population areas like the state of Iowa, businesses are really the core fabric of all of our communities, and it's incredibly important for the state of Iowa to continue to have successful businesses in our communities. You can see our mission and our vision as well. But really, our focus is trying to help small to medium-sized businesses. I worked in a large corporation, and I know they have resources that they can apply to these things. So we recognize that the small and medium-sized businesses sometimes don't. So we can provide some of those resources to help with the things that may not get done in a small and medium-sized business because there just aren't resources available. What do we do? I've already talked about this a little bit. We have our own little three-circle thing, just like Dan had a little bit before. But we're really focused on providing value, and we have a lot of different ways that we can do it: business transition, business growth and innovation, outreach programs, education programs that we provide, consultation up to a point. But we're really there to facilitate tools for success for businesses. So that value and slice in the middle, that's what we're really focused on. Where can we help businesses be even more successful than they already are? Our impact, statewide, nationwide, business growth, we collaborated with 170 businesses over the past year and almost 5,700 employees, 46 or more educational and networking programs, conducted 23 different seminars on succession planning or employee ownership to 91 companies in Iowa. So we're very active in this space, and we're trying to reach out and become even more active. And I'll talk about a couple of the events that we have coming up that hopefully will continue to spread the word of the capability and what we have to offer businesses across the state. Bottom line, businesses are about people, communities are about people, ownership is about helping people. So we're here to engage with people. The far left photo is our Business and Community Services former director, Randy Pilkington, and Senator Grassley at last year's Iowa Center for Employee Ownership Iowa CEO Conference. You can just see that we operate in a lot of different areas. We operate in large seminar forum, classroom forum, direct with businesses, direct in technology areas, whatever we need to do to help businesses, we're able and capable of operating in that space. Some of the transition services programs that we provide, and I'm not going to go into these in great detail. I'm going to hit a few of them over the next several slides, but things that you think about for preparing for business transition. So helping your business come up with an accurate and real life business valuation. Looking at what drives your business, how can you improve? Assessing that business, employee ownership models, giving you some alternatives, pre-feasibility studies for ownership model transition, business continuity consultation. So working with businesses that have the need to work on succession planning consultation as well, and some other pieces as well. In the lower right-hand corner, earning CE credits. We're just really starting to delve into this a bit. We have a program that we've been offering on employee ownership that does have some CE credits attached. We're working on getting that more and more because we know that continuing education is a big piece for some professions and maintaining certifications in different areas. So we're working to try and provide help in that area as well. So let me talk about transition solutions. So that right-hand side of our umbrella, what are we really working on? Now, succession planning is the big topic, right? That's what we're here for in this webinar. But ensuring that smooth and organized transfer of leadership and knowledge. We've already talked about how that might work. To do that, though, you really have to understand if you're going to do succession planning, and it is external to your company, not within the operation of your business, you really have to understand the value of your business. When you go about any kind of a transition of a private company, you really, or even a public company, you need to understand what the value is so that when you transition, you get the value for your business and those that are transitioning to understand what the value is. We work a lot on employee ownership models here at Advanced Iowa in our Center for Employee Ownership, as the name implies. Employee ownership is a huge topic nationwide right now. There are several national societies, national conferences going on that really talk about the value of employee ownership, the value to you, to all of the stakeholders in the business, the communities that they operate in, the employees that are part of the business, the owners and the ownership structure, even the customers and the suppliers of those businesses. We know that the multipliers within communities are huge in terms of the business and the baseline living that is provided within a community. So we focus on that employee ownership to make sure that we're providing opportunities for workers to be part of the ownership structure of the company. Business valuation, kind of all starts there. You have to understand what you have before you can understand where you want to go. Obtain a current fair market value estimate of the company. We have some software that we use that helps us create ranges for business valuations so that you can accurately understand, as you might expect. Most owners think their business is worth more than it really is, and most buyers think that the business they're looking at is worth less than it really is. So we help to try and find that fair market value, that sweet spot where business is actually valued. Excuse me. We also look at key factors, so identifying those key factors, and remember, succession planning is something that you don't start on Monday and finish on Friday. You start succession planning, what's the old Chinese proverb? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the second best time is now. We really believe in planting that tree early, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 8 years before you're looking at transitioning your business. You should be looking into your valuation and what the drivers are so that you can grow your company, so that you can improve your profitability, so you can get the most value you possibly can out of that. And we're able to do that through some of the assessments that we provide businesses that we work with. We do provide business continuity consultation. So everything from that succession planning within the business to different opportunities and different options that exist to continuity consultation outside of the current business. So how do you develop a strategy to maintain operations and safeguard the long-term stability of your business for your employees and the communities that you're operating? Succession planning consultation is part of that. So how do you create that business transition plan that lets you understand how that succession is going to happen, as well as then beginning to prepare the individuals or the pieces of the business that are going to be transitioned so that they understand the contents, they understand the operations, so that the transition happens more successfully and helps maintain that legacy and financial health of the business that we're working in. We already hit this slide once, but I want to re-emphasize the critical roles that we're going to be looking at. It's not just leadership, but it's key talent, as the second item would suggest. There are, in every business, there are those key people that make the business run. It may not be the executives, they may not be the leadership team, but they're the key talent. We want to make sure that we maintain and recognize that those are necessary to also plan for succession forward. We also want to ensure continuity. That's the bottom line. When you're doing succession planning, it's to ensure that not just that you have continuity, but that continuity is seamless, that continuity is comfortable, it's not necessarily controversial. You're maintaining the business in a way that everybody that's involved with the business is happy. Employee ownership is one of the places that we really look at, and there are several different business models that we work with. We already talked, Dan already talked about board governance, but employee ownership is creating businesses that are owned by their employees. Family businesses are a special segment of that, but there are a lot of businesses that are not family owned, but can be owned by employees. And we have some different models that we can work with: ESOPs, EOTs, worker cooperatives. I'll talk about those a bit in a minute. But they require equity investment. There's a risk and reward that's part of it. Being controlled by their employees, then there's board governance, there's participatory management, but an employee-owned company still has a board. It's still run by the board itself. It's not necessarily, every decision is not necessarily controlled by the individual employees, although they are participating in the management business. So, there's some things when we start talking to businesses about employee ownership that we need to make sure that are understood. Each model has a little bit of a different flavor and a different set of things that need to be concerned with moving towards it. So these are some of the different models that are out there. I'm not going to go into detail. We have another session coming up next week at this time, on Wednesday next week, where Stacy Molinex, who you saw earlier, that's part of the Advanced Iowa team, is going to go into detail about these employee ownership models. But there's something called an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. One of the bigger things that is done, it's a little more complex, a little more complicated. There's a lot more paperwork and legality involved with it, but it's a very solid plan for transitioning ownership to employees. There's also worker cooperatives, kind of at the other end, tends to be a little bit smaller companies. It does transition more to the workers cooperating to manage the company. And then there should be a third bullet there. It's titled Employee Stock Ownership Plan. It should be titled Employee Ownership Trust, an EOT box. Employee Ownership Trusts are newer models that are coming out. They're new to us here in the US, but they are the most often practiced employee ownership model in Europe. We're starting to see some traction here, kind of in the mid space between the smaller and the larger ESOPs and worker cooperatives, this employee ownership trust model. And then there's some hybrids, direct share ownership. So there are several different employee ownership models that are out there. The one that you select is really based on the circumstances. And I got to say, even within each of these models, it's not a one size fit all. There's all sorts of different variations that happen with each individual company and how that model needs to be structured. Again, Stacy's going to go through more of those next week at this time in a lot more detail. We will get together with a business that is interested in looking at employee ownership and just do a pre-feasibility study. Look at a high-level analysis of financials. We are, we sign NDAs with companies that we work with so that you don't feel threatened by our ability. And one of the things that you always have to recognize when you're working with us is we're not competing with any business. We're not out there as a manufacturer or out there as a service provider. We're a pretty confidential, pretty comfortable business or area organization to work with. So we will do a pre-feasibility study and just help you understand whether models like this might work for your business. Worker cooperative development, we already talked about that particular model. It requires maybe a little bit more leadership handholding to be able to transition or to be able to bring up a business to work with cooperative. So we put this in as kind of a special category. All right, so again, I'm not here to give you the details on employee ownership models. Stacy again will do that next week. We also have coming up several different things. We have a webinar, the Jepson webinar on employee ownership. UNI sponsors the Jepson seminar series every year. It's coming up October 9th, I'm sorry. This Jepson webinar, there's a panelist, a group of people that are very knowledgeable about employee ownership from different areas. You can read down through these. I want to highlight though I want to highlight two of them on the bottom here. The IO CEO Employee Ownership Annual Conference registrations opened officially the 1st of September. We're already up to slightly under 100 registrations. Last year we had 150, the year before we had 75, so it's a very quickly growing conference. Lots of excellent speakers, excellent breakout sessions. The registration is available and we'll give you that link. We also have kind of a unique opportunity at UNI coming up. We're having our own TEDx, TEDx UNI, coming up October 25th. There's a lot of different business topics that will be talked about at TEDx, but the Dean of the College of Business, Leslie Wilson, is going to be giving her TEDx talk on employee ownership. And she's been working really hard to make that a very compelling session, so you won't want to miss that. So some upcoming events that are out there for employee ownership, and again, emphasizing the conference October 23rd. It's at the FFA Enrichment Center in Ankeny. That's where it's held at, so it's pretty easy to get to. It's a very nice facility, October 23rd. Dan, I think there are some events for you coming up. I did mention day 2 coming up. Sorry, I thought I was transitioning to a different slide. I did mention Stacy will be talking next week, day 2 of these sessions, a deeper dive into privately held companies, succession planning, conducted by Stacy. So you'll get a lot more detail on those ownership model types and how to do succession planning, those types of companies. So Dan, yeah, I think you're up there.
Yeah, I think Stacy's going to touch on too, like kind of, what does a buyer of a business look for? What kinds of attributes, what kinds of things do you want to have built into your business to make it attractive to somebody, for somebody to buy? But yeah, in terms of our events, so our events are focused on family-owned companies. Our audience is limited to family-owned companies. You can see we've got a couple things coming up here. In a couple of weeks, we'll be doing something on next gen leadership development and how a couple of Iowa companies have done that with their next generation of leaders. Our annual conference is in early November, and we're going to have speakers from several Iowa family companies speaking at that, including Vermeer, Anderson, Erickson Dairy, Coke, Atlantic Bottling, and a few others. January 26th, we have another virtual session on family business, and as you can see, we've got a few other things going on into next year as well. So leave it at that. This is just more information about our conference. We'll be featuring the Osted family, which is they're in the retail golf industry with locations across the Midwest, and I think they have 3 or 4 different locations in Iowa, actually. And they'll be talking about their succession story of how they've transitioned from first gen to second gen and some of the hiccups along the way and some of the things they've learned and passing that on to other families. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, please let us know, reach out, and we'd love to have you there. Thank you.
So with that, I think we are at our Q&A piece. Is that correct, Megan?
We are. I don't have any questions in the Q&A box yet, but if anyone has any, you're welcome to add them in there. Just a reminder, you can find the Q&A on the bottom half of your screen. I'm gonna go ahead and just throw a question out there to get us started. Um, What would you guys say are the biggest misconceptions about succession planning, and how can families navigate the emotional side of leadership transitions?
So Dan, I'll let you talk about the emotional side, maybe of family transitions. You've got to be a lot more close to that than I am. Biggest misconceptions, if I just look at employee ownership, one of the biggest misconceptions is that employees have to have dollars that they're going to put in to go buy the company. That's not the way it works. It's an ownership transition strategy that the leaders work through banks and financial instruments to be able to transition ownership to employees. So it's not quite as scary as Dan coming into his business of 10 employees next week and saying, hey, I need you to figure out a way to provide $1 million to buy the business, so I'm going to close. That's not the way it works. There's a financial instrument that's set up and the transition happens over time. Employees don't have an outlay of money to do that. The other misconception that I think is out there is that succession planning is clandestine. It has to be tricky. It has to happen behind the scenes. It really doesn't. And I was part of a very large corporation for 30 plus years, and we did succession planning not to another owner, but within different functions within that company. And we were very open about it. And it helps to be open about it so people know and are comfortable with the transitions that are going to happen. So it doesn't have to be this super secret behind the scenes thing that's happening. Dan, how about your perspective? I think Dan's trying to figure out how to unmute. You're still muted, Dan.
I'm sorry. I was still trying to figure out what to say, but I would say in terms of the misconception, I think definitely money is a big one that you think somebody who you'd like to be a buyer of your business that you think has nowhere near the type of capital to buy it. I think that knowing that there are a lot of creative financing solutions and structures to a deal can make a lot of people bankable that you might not otherwise think would be. I think that that's a big one. Good point by Todd. On the family side, um, family strife is incredibly common. If it weren't, we wouldn't have a center focused on it, frankly, because our center does really nothing with the business side of family business. Our focus is all about the family part of things and how do we as a family get along, interact, that kind of thing. And a big part of that, and I've heard this said by a family business owner in the past, is to remember that clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And what he's meaning by that, of course, is don't let things be don't allow things to be put up for interpretation or assumption, but have clear conversations with your family about what whatever the topic might be. If it's who's going to take over when I retire, having that conversation. Who is it going to be? Who might it be? Talking through that even before you know the answers is critical. And so I always go back to that phrase that he said, clear is kind. So having open communication, having regular family meetings, as boring and dry and pointless as that might sound, especially to the founder. Oftentimes, the kids love those, really want to have those conversations, and the kids' spouses really want to have those conversations, and cousins, whoever it might be that's involved, they want clarity. They want to know what's going on, what you're thinking, and so if you're the owner, I get that you might be thinking, why do I need to communicate this stuff? It should be whatever I want to do, and that type of thing, and um, but communicating early is critical. So. I would just say that. Thanks, Megan.
So there is a question in the Q&A. For a business that is ready to start the process, what is the best route or group to contact? You can see on screen connection points for both Family Business Center and Advance Iowa. I guess the easiest way to say it is, if it's a family business, contact through the Family Business Center. If it's not a family business, contact through Advance Iowa. You're probably going to get very similar answers and resources. We both have access to each other, but Dan and his team are very special people with a lot of knowledge about how to work directly with family business concerns. And Advance Iowa has the same type of capability for employee ownership models and non-family businesses. Hopefully that answers the question. If not, ask a different one and I'll try to get you a better answer.
Yeah, thanks for having us on today, Megan. This was great. I know how important this topic is, and for those that fail to plan, they obviously often plan to fail. And so I think having an opportunity to talk through this is great.
Yeah, thank you guys for being on.
Oh, there's another question that just popped up. Are there fees associated with consultation help in these organizations? No, there aren't. There really aren't. At least for Vance, Iowa. I think it's the same for Dan. There may be some, if there are some tools that need to be used, sometimes there's some minor fees, but they're not. We don't have very. That doesn't happen very often, and when it does, they're not very. They're not onerous at all.
Yeah, we don't have fees either for most of our consulting work.
That's the advantage of accessing your university. That's part
Yeah.
of the tax dollars that everyone pays in the state of Iowa.
I'm gonna go ahead for our next question, pull another one out of our pre-prepared ones. So you guys mentioned a little bit about market validation. Why is a fair market validation important before transitioning ownership?
I don't know exactly what you mean by that, Megan, but if you're talking about like a valuation of the business, is that,
Mhm.
yeah,
I would say, I mean, when it comes right down to it, when you have two sides that are, one was looking to buy, one's looking to sell, obviously for that to happen, you have to come to an agreement. So it has to be a fair market value from both sides. It has to be something that provides worth and value to the seller. Otherwise, they're not going to sell a business. And it has to be something that has worth and value to the buyer. It has to be fair so that they're able to go operate that business on a continuing basis in the market as it exists. So it is a really, really, really important thing to come to agreement on pretty early in the process. What's the valuation? And not only what is the valuation, but what's it based on? What are the assumptions that you made when you came up with that valuation?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with that. Just having some sort of a basis for valuation gives you as an owner an idea of where am I at. It's a measuring stick, of course, and helps, as Todd was pointing out, if you don't have a realistic idea of valuation of what you want to sell your company for, you're either going to have no interest or, you're very limited in the buyer pool that you're going to have just because most buyers are going to have to get financing of some type from a third party. And if the deal doesn't pencil out, if you're not leaving enough meat on the bone for the new owner of the business, it's going to be very hard for them to finance and get it bought. So, um, not to mention a lot of times you sell a business, you take on an owner's note as a seller to the buyer, and you want to make sure you get that note paid back to you, right? And so if you're selling the business in a way that's going to choke them out, as far as cash flow or something like that, you're not going to get paid anyway. And so uh, I used to work with a lot more small businesses than I do now, but it was surprising to me how many always thought their business was worth, the nice round figure of $1 million. Seemed like everybody thinks their business is worth something right around that number. And as you go through evaluation and find out your business is only worth 4 or 500,000, it's all of a sudden okay. What do I do here? Do I sell for half of what I was hoping for, or do I continue to run the business, maybe build it, add layers of value to it? And I know Stacy will be talking about those next week. So anyway, this is just a couple thoughts I have on that.
Well, unless we have any other questions come in, I'm going to go ahead and end with one last question for you guys. What's the number one thing you want everyone listening today to take away from what we've talked about?
Wow, that's a great question.
I think from my
Let's
end, I would just say to do to not think about succession as something you're going to do when you're in your late 50s or 60s, but to think about succession as soon as you start the business. Think about your exit as soon as you enter. How, who could I sell this to? What are they going to want to buy? That's ultimately going to put far more money in your pocket if you think through that lens right from the beginning. So I would just, you know, I've heard it said before that uh, businesses uh, who are focused around their owner and who have owners that are integral to the business are worth very little. But businesses where the owner is not critical to the business, those are the businesses people want to buy. So think about those things as you're building your business, and I think you'll end up with a lot more money in your pocket at the end.
I think to answer the question from great points, by the way, Dan, really good points. To answer the question from my perspective, I'm going to steer away from details about employee ownership models and that kind of thing that you'll hear more about next week. I would say understand that businesses have impact far beyond your own four walls. Your communities are impacted, your supply chain, upstream, downstream, suppliers and customers are impacted by the success of the business. So, heavy as the head wears the crown. You're the ones that are really maintaining this business, this revenue stream for more than just what's inside of the four walls of your operating unit. So it's a really, I mean, it's important enough when you think about it inside the four walls, but it's really important when you think about it beyond those four walls.
Great insights. And thank you guys both again for joining us and going over all this information. I'm going to go ahead and close us out. Um, so thank you again, Dan and Todd, for sharing all that information. Just like they said, succession planning is a journey, and with the right partners, it can be transformative. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be available to watch on our website or by searching Iowa Source Link on YouTube if you ever want to refer back to the information we covered today. If you would like to learn more or schedule a consultation with the Family Business Center or Advance Iowa, we will be sharing this presentation file in that same email where you'll be receiving the recording within the next week, and all of their contact information will be in that email. Join us again next Wednesday, September 24th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time for part 2 of this webinar series, where we'll be going more in depth about creating your succession plan. Visit iowasourcelink.com and navigate to our webinar page to sign up today. Thank you all for joining us, and until next time, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Have a great day, you guys. Take care.